need inspiration, motivation, or hope? Do you let fear hold you back? Sometimes you feel lost or just stuck in your own thoughts, and you want a clear path to give you results. Then, my friend, you are in the right place. My name is Rachel Best, and I am your host of How to Make a Mark in the World, Finding Your Signature. Go ahead and grab a pen and paper because you're going to want to take notes. Good morning. Back to another day of How to Make a Mark in the World, Finding Your Signature. Today we have such a special guest. I got the opportunity her and I are in a book together. It's not, I can't even say it's a collaborated book. It's so much more than a collaborated book. Yeah, and I love that we've gotten to meet one another. I've met so many amazing people all over the country that are making an impact. And so her and I got to connect a few weeks ago because we interviewed her on that podcast. And I asked her to be a part of this podcast. And so today, Shelly is just going to share with us the things that she's gone through, as well as the obstacles, where she's come from, where she's at now, where she's going. And so get your pens and paper ready, friends, because Shelly is going to definitely drop some amazing nuggets. I loved our interview the last time. It was so good. And you're so inspiring, and you just offer so much hope with all the things that you've done and where you've been and what you're doing. So go ahead, Shelly, and just share with us, who is Shelly Sanitko?
Oh, wow. Well, that's a loaded question, right? Who is Shelly? You know, it's funny because there was a time when Shelly even asked Shelly that question. I look back over my life. I'm 62 years old now, and I look back over my life and where I was and just how the pieces of the whole puzzle kind of fit together and how God's orchestrated this whole thing. And I look back to, getting married. I've been married 40 years to my college sweetheart. And
Wow.
And we were living this sort of, whatever the American dream life is, the 2 kids, the dogs, the house, that the careers. I was an occupational therapist by degree, kind of specializing in hands, and we're doing all that, living our life. And then boom, in comes this, unexpected storms in life. This wasn't the first one, but this was probably the most major. I kind of talk to people and I say, how, like, if you're sitting at the beach and there's all these ripples of the waves coming in, and on a stormy day the waves are bigger, and then sometimes it's like a tsunami hits your life. And that's sort of what I liken this storm in our life was, sort of like a tsunami, that just literally rewrote our entire story, because you think at that point where life is headed until you don't. And our son was 8.5 when that hit. We have 2 kids, as I said. Our daughter's our youngest. She was 6, and our son was 8.5. And it was like a switch went off in his body, and it was a neuromuscular storm. And we ended up in the hospital for 6 weeks. He had, during the first week, lost the ability to walk, talk, use his hands. And at this time, there was some mild trauma at his birth, but he didn't manifest any real symptoms other than being a toe walker and a little unstable. So what happened, though, in losing the ability, this storm, is like a switch went off in his body, and he got all these distorted torsion movements. And basically he was almost in a fetal position, that the spasms were so strong and so painful. I remember him walloping his nose and getting bloody nose, like all the things, like it was crazy. And they had no idea, testing him for brain tumors, all the different things. Ultimately, he was diagnosed with a rare neuromuscular movement disorder. And that was sort of the start of our journey into the unknown, basically. You don't get a manual when you get a diagnosis oftentimes. And that sort of was the start of our changed life and really my journey into caregiving, which I'm still doing today, over 28 years later. So I have a lot of experience now in what it looks like to be a caregiver, but also what it's like to get stuck in life and lost. A place that I think oftentimes caregivers find themselves in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, just being a mom, we lose ourselves just being a mom, let alone being a
Right.
caregiver and a mom. And so just share with us a little bit, like as you went through that journey of, how being a caregiver, being a mom of, somebody that has to take care, like I'm assuming 24/7, you have to take care of him.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Well, yeah, special needs moms, we're our own like breed, right? But moms, we are our own, like, so any mom knows what it's like to be a mama bear. And
Mm-hmm.
so I approached this storm pretty much with the intensity and grit of a storm chaser. Imagine a storm chaser. That's sort of how I took it on. It was like I had no idea what this was going to look like. But as a family, my husband and I, we were determined to have the most normal possible life for him as possible. And I think any mom can identify with that. I think any special needs mom can identify with that. And as an occupational therapist, I wasn't necessarily intimidated by this world. I didn't welcome it as now my live it program, right? It was much easier when I could go home from work. But I think one of the things that happens is mama bear comes out. And I know as a mom, we often try to control, manage, and fix everything. Like we sort of take that on as our personal identity. Like,
Mm-hmm.
mama can fix this, it's all going to be okay. And sometimes it's not okay. And we start to struggle with what does that mean? Is that so we can begin to take on that identity that we're not doing enough? And so we try harder, we do more. And before you know it, you're spiraling down, but you don't know it. You don't see it because you're so entrenched in the trenches of just really surviving. I think that's what happens whenever a storm hits our life. The natural response is survival.
Mm-hmm.
Your brain doesn't like the discomfort. You're doing anything and everything you can to stay afloat. But over time of spending yourself and with this determination and grit, which I think is a strength, it always was a strength for me. I've always been this overcomer. I have a history of some things I've had to overcome. Even my marriage, we had a season before AJ was sick where we had to overcome a lot of problems in our marriage. And so we were on this nice place. And actually, that put me into a victim mode for a while because I thought, oh, we just went through losing my mom and to cancer and our marriage struggles. And not even a year and a half later, we're going through this trauma with our son. And I remember thinking, I'm a strong woman of faith. And my faith grew during the loss of my mom and my marriage. And so here I am going, well, seriously, now this? Like enough already. Has my faith not been tested enough? And then we're walking through this. And so that determination and grit is a strength, but it also over time became a weakness for me because I didn't allow myself to feel all the things. And in that survival mode, I kind of pulled inward and I just focused on what I had, tried to grow in my faith, tried to move on. Okay, what lessons do I need to learn? Let's get on with this. And I actually went into full out trying to rehab AJ and
Wow.
and trying to learn everything I could about generalized dystonia and what are the latest treatments. And so over time, year over year, you're seeking out these treatments and all these different meds, and things aren't working. And it was one disappointment after another. Things that showed a lot of promise didn't. And so it got to the point where I felt like my faith was constantly being tested. And I didn't want to admit that I was struggling. And I really even got to a place where I was mad. I was mad at God. I was like, really? Must I experience every hard thing in life, from abuse, to, marriage stuff, to all the things, to this now a child and disability. And, why does life have to be so hard? All the questions I think believers ask themselves is, why does life so hard? Why do bad things happen to good people? And really, how do I get out of this?
Right.
How do I get out of this?
Yeah. Yeah. So, as you were going through all of that, and your faith being tested, and just everything going on around you, what was the turning point, and just trying to find an answer and being disappointed over and over and over again? What was the turning point for you that made it like, was there a turning point in there for you where you decided to start doing what you're doing now?
Yeah. Well, you think about it, you start spiraling down, right? And you're in this pit and you're stuck, and you keep, I was in ministry. I was leading women's ministry, teaching Bible studies, doing these things. As AJ got out of high school and graduated, though, he was home. And so his care required more. So, of course, I became more isolated. I couldn't do those things because now my role was more at home. And so, again, more spiraling, more disappointment, right? Wah, 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 wah. And I think what happened was there was a moment, actually. You get sick and tired of being sick and tired. You realize that the things you're doing to bring comfort to you, like for me, it was eating, and food addiction and things. And it's not bringing you comfort. It gives you momentary satisfaction. But I was more and more isolated. I was gaining more and more weight. And I remember it was an Easter. Right after Easter, my daughter sent pictures, and I saw joy in everybody's face, except I saw a woman in a picture and I didn't recognize her. And I thought, oh my God, look at you. Look at you. She did. She looked like she carried the weight of the world on her shoulders. And I honestly think she was. And she was overwhelmed. She was overtired. She was overweight. I really didn't recognize her anymore.
Wow.
So I remember asking myself, what did all that determination and grit and pushing through and trying to make things happen, where did it bring me? It brought me into a pit. And I remember in the pit, kind of trying to rearrange. I kind of joke. I said I was redecorating and trying to rearrange and do all the things I could to make it comfortable in the pit. But when I looked at her face, I thought, who is she? And I knew in that moment that I needed to do something. And so the first obvious thing I could see was that she was overweight. And being sick and tired of being sick and tired was not going to allow me to do the things I needed to do in the way I wanted to do them. I had constant back pain and joint pain, and AJ's care. He's 6 foot tall,
Oh my goodness.
doing the transfers and all the things. It was getting increasingly difficult. And so I thought, is this how I want to live my life? joyless, isolated, feeling awful. No. And so I knew the only thing to do was to search out a good, simple program, because I had tried a lot of things to lose the weight, and what I knew I needed was simple, and I needed accountability and support. But I had tried some things that required me to be out of the home too much. So ultimately I ended up finding, through a friend of mine, the Optavia program. And it was, you eat this 5 times a day, you make one meal. Okay, well, one meal, that's not too overwhelming, because most caregivers are kind of in this perpetual state of overwhelm. So I needed to find something. So I started losing the weight. What was really most beautiful was it also started to address the habits and the addictions. And so when the physiology was somewhat under control in my body, I remember having moments of clarity in my mind, and I started going, oh, this is how I'm supposed to feel. I haven't felt this way in a really long time. And that actually opened the door to more things. And so I began to address, oh, you didn't see yourself going down a path of victimhood, but I was living in a place of either I was the victim in my life, like, oh my God, my life is so hard. Why? Or I was the hero, like the Mrs. Doubtfire. I'm here to save the day, that whole thing. And this was where I was going. And the villain in my life was this disease, AJ's disability, not him, but the disease. And this was where I lived, and it was very disempowering. And so when I started getting physically healthy, I think that allowed me the bandwidth to start going, okay, something's not right here with Shelly. How can we shift that? And that was really the start of it, and the journey that I took to kind of that reawakening. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, no. And I really want you to touch on, the isolated, the joyless, the overwhelmed, the disempowering, because I know I have so many conversations with people that are in that spot right now of the being isolated and all the things that I just said. And so can you speak to that person? Like, if you could inspire and offer that person that's watching hope for how to overcome those things. Can you just speak on that, and just as if you were just speaking right to that person?
Well, which is really, so it's almost like looking in the mirror, because I think the first thing that I feel like you need to do is you have to have that moment of honesty, where you just go, am I okay here? Am I okay here? And the honest answer to that, of course, is no, you're not okay there. So what are the things that you're telling yourself that aren't true, that are keeping you stuck in that place? Are you without hope? For me as a believer, I knew in my heart of hearts that the Lord was my hope, but I wasn't operating from that place. I was operating in my own strength. And so I had to go, okay, so this is my reality. How can I begin to make changes toward that? So when you get honest with yourself and ask yourself the questions, and then you begin to ask yourself, okay, how much of this am I bringing on myself? How much of this can I actually shift? Because there are things we can change. So is it my circumstances that are causing me to feel this way? Or is it my response to my circumstances? And I'll be honest, eating a lot of sugar and unhealthy food was making me irritable. It was depleting my energy. All of the, and it had become my comfort, it had become my friend, it had become all these different things. And so that had to go. So that was important. So when I started getting honest with myself, and then I think looking at what the obstacles are they real obstacles?
Mm.
Yeah, I have a lot of real obstacles, but some of them were obstacles that I believed couldn't be overcome. And so I looked at them with a state of hopelessness and helplessness. And I had to realize, no, some things could get delegated. And some things were things I was bringing on myself because they were the choices I was making. See, I think we get into this place where we're blaming the circumstances and not really, it's the circumstances, and therefore I do this. I have no time. I have no this. I have no that because of this. And I had to start owning what was mine. And I don't mean that from a place of doing more or being better. I just mean getting to the raw, honest place of going, this is out of control. I can't control this, but I do have control over that. Does that make sense?
Oh,
And
yeah.
so I had to sit and look at those things, but with an honest lens. And I think the truth of God's word helped me reveal what was true and what was the things that stories I was telling myself. And so as I began to take these little baby steps, toward whole health, the physical health shifted. Then before you know it, mentally, you're beginning to be empowered because you're taking steps. And I think through that now I'm learning, okay, how can I help someone else? And the first place I think is first just they need to see they want it.
Right.
You can't, like with an alcoholic, if they deny they have a problem, it's pretty hard. There's not a readiness. There's not a willingness. It's like, are you willing to take a step? Are you willing to look in the mirror and even admit that you don't have it all together? Gosh. I mean, I took that on as like, well, something's wrong with me, And so, yeah. So those are some of the thoughts, kind of losing my train of thought, but those are
No, I
some of
love
the
it.
things that I had to do, and then create a plan. It's not just enough to see the problems. You have to begin to start looking for ways, that baby steps, not coming on it like balls to the wall, sorry, but with this intensity, which we often do. It's January. How many people aren't going, my clothes don't fit, blah, 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 and they come on it with this intensity, like I took on the storm with AJ, right? This intensity that it's going to wane. You can't sustain that. But little baby steps consistently over time is what moves us forward. And that's how I began to take this step. And then admitting you need help. Because I think that's the other thing, is oftentimes we go into a do-it-yourselfer mode, right? And we think we can do this on our own. And the fact is, you quit on yourself far sooner.
Right. And you again, you've said so much that I want to kind of just unpack, because when you talk about, there's, we're both familiar with the drama triangle, the empowerment triangle, and the victim, the villain, the hero being in that, and how can we shift from being there, and then over into the empowerment triangle, and the challenger, the coach, I forget the third thing right now, but
I know, I I do
remember it
too,
now.
off the
I
top of my
remember.
head.
I remember what it is right now. But you know, and just really being honest with yourself. And you know, I know I've had that problem too in my life, that you know, sometimes we have to look in the mirror and be honest with ourselves in different areas of our life. You know what? Maybe I'm the common denominator. Maybe I'm the problem. And
Right.
but with every problem, there's a solution if we're willing to deal with the problem. And so, you
Right.
know, being able to admit that you have a problem, being honest, you know, delegating, my goodness, like we think we have to do it all. And I know I've been in that spot in my life before, that I thought I had to do it all, and you know, it was all me and blah blah blah. And then I realized that that was my ego that thought I had to do it all. And
Mm-hmm.
when I realized that it's okay to not have all the answers. It's okay to not do it all. It's okay if somebody else does it a little bit different than you. That's
Yes.
okay. That you, and it's so freeing when you just let go and release that, because you're binding yourself up, you're holding yourself back and operating in your zone of genius. You're holding yourself back of having that happiness and that joy, because you're trying to do something that either A, you're not that good at, or B, like you're like, okay, well, this is just not that important for me to do and somebody else can do it, so let's just get it off my
Right.
plate. And also, when you know, I loved your questions of, you know, what are you telling yourself, what's your reality, how much of this am I bringing on myself? You know, that's a
Mm-hmm.
big, that can be probably a good, you know, gut punch. You know,
Oh.
what am I responsible for? And it's taking that ownership, that responsibility, and just sitting
Mm-hmm.
and reflecting, and to know it's okay if you're the problem. It's okay if you're the problem, if you're willing to deal with the problem. And you know, and when we start really just dealing with the problem, dealing with that thing, then we become better people, and then
Amen.
people around us enjoy being around us, because we feel better about ourselves, we have the hope, we have the joy, we have, you know, the empowerment, we have the community. And that's another thing of, you know,
Oh,
like you were
yeah.
talking about, you know, having that accountability, and you know, people go full force, you know, but having a community. I'm so big on community, I
Mm-hmm.
know you are too, of just having the like-mindedness of people, that you don't have to have it all together, but when you are together as a collective, as a unit, as a
Yes.
community, you know, each person has their own strengths, and then you're not isolated anymore, because we're made for connection, we're not made to be
Right.
alone. And so, you know, and then also how you talked about, you know, what's the problem, and then, you know, creating the plan and those baby steps, you know, like at the bottom, you know, having that, okay, well, here's my current reality, here's where I am right now, and this is where I desire to go. And then, like you said, just like the rungs, rings, whatever, on a ladder, right? We're filling those in. Okay, well, what is that baby step I can do? Okay, got that. Okay, now what? Okay, got that. And so you shared so many good nuggets.
Uh,
I love it.
well, and being okay with falling, because you know we put
Mm.
a plan together, and I often tell people it's like, you know, if you go shoe shopping, you know, not all shoes even fit at all, you know, and you're like, you know, it takes me forever to buy shoes, but um you know, but you have to walk around. Sometimes you have to break them in, and
Mm.
sometimes they just aren't a good fit. And
Mhm.
you have to get a different pair,
Yep.
you know, and so not everything that we think is going to work or is that next step on the rung is it, or maybe you'll slip a little bit and you'll fall, and it's okay, because
Mhm.
falling is part of the journey.
Yep.
It's the getting up that's the most important part. And so, yeah, I think moms, we want to be super mom, and we put on a facade, or we look at Facebook, well, everybody's got it together except
Mhm.
me,
Mhm.
and which isn't true.
No.
But that's what we tell ourselves. Or
Right.
if I get vulnerable, I'm not strong. If I ask for help, something's wrong with me. Well, actually, something's wrong with us when we don't ask for help sometimes. Like, things aren't going to change. And I remember one of the things, if you want change, sometimes, you have to create the change. Nothing changes if nothing changes. And that's what I learned is I wanted different. I wanted to feel alive again, but I wasn't always willing to make the changes that I felt were the next right step. And so I think, it's so many of those things, right? Yeah, it's just really been an interesting journey that God continues to have me on. And really, it is my desire to really empower other people to overcome the challenges. Challenges are a part of our life. But how do we experience that renewed hope? And what I'm learning about renewal, especially in this journey of stepping out, and you've probably experienced it too, Rachel, as you're coming alongside and coaching other people, is there is an enemy at work. Now, I know greater is he who is in me than he who is in the world. But I'll tell you, he will seek to steal your joy, and he will seek to extinguish your voice and quench the hope that is ours and rob us of the blessing. And so one of the things that I try to do on Caring for Me Too is I seek to help people get unstuck because they're stuck and you're in that rut. And the harder we try, the deeper we go into the rut. Right. So you have to do something different, right? If what you're doing ain't working, so to conquer that burnout and really reclaim their identity because there's that lostness. And, the scripture says, awake, O sleeper. And I feel like we can get lost in hopelessness, but there is so much on the other side when you take that step, the baby step, not the intense step, right? But the baby step and move forward. So,
Yeah, that's so good. And I'm such a big believer on, renewing your mind every day and getting in the word. And, we have to, putting your armor on and just being aware of what is, going on around you. And so like I daily, we are putting our armor on. We are, living in, the fruits of the spirit and just renewing our mind, because when we renew our mind, that's where I find my hope is in my identity and who God has created me to be. And so when we know our identity and who he is, when those things come at us, when life happens and when the enemy tries to come and kill, destroy, and do what he does, lie, and when he comes in and tries to do that, I just, remember like, okay, you know what, like there's, even if it's a person, right, a person that comes and at you or whatever, but it just saying, you know what, that's not the person, that's the devil operating in that person. And so, again, just having your identity in Christ and knowing who you are in Christ and renewing your mind, surrounding yourself with people that are like-minded. And I absolutely have enjoyed this conversation with you, Shelly.
Me too.
And yes, and it always goes so fast. The time goes so fast. I know. Always such good nuggets and good conversation. But, I really want you to share with us, like what is next for you as you're moving through 2024? Oh my gosh, like 2 days left of January. What is next for you and what you're doing?
Well, what we're doing is we're actually really looking to develop some courses right now. And what does that look like? And so we're in the process of kind of building what this looks like. I mean, we envision, something dealing with the caregiver stress. Because I mean, let's face it, you either have been a caregiver, you are a caregiver, you will become a caregiver, or you're going to need to be cared for. So that's the 4 kinds of people. So we're all going to face or are facing this. So dealing with the stress and overwhelm, that's definitely one of the areas. Also, I envision us educating the public too. And because I know that oftentimes you are isolated and you can't get out as much as you would like as caregivers, and that's just a part of it. But I want them to be seen. I want the problem to be seen. And so I want to actually empower people, because oftentimes people don't know what to do. So that's another part of how can we help and educate and encourage others, neighbors, friends, family, and in the needs of the caregiver who maybe is struggling to give voice to that. And so that's another aspect. So we're in the process of kind of, I guess, building the machine that will be caring for me too. And so that we can approach whole health. You know, I do believe that loving the Lord with all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength, but also it's whole health, mind, body, emotion, you know, all of those areas is, that's what living a full, joy-filled life is.
Yeah, I love
So
that. I
that's
love
what we're in
that.
the process of doing.
Wow, I love that you are taking your story, your testimony, and creating a space for people for the awareness. And that's why I love like my podcast and also the Change Book podcast of like just talking to people and how there's so many people that have been through different things that the average person is not aware of. And you know, I would be that average person I'm like, oh, like I never thought about that. I never thought about
Right.
that. And so that's why I love having people like you on here, is to just create that awareness to people, that, and also for those people that are in your spot, that
Right.
they can be like, oh, I'm not alone. Because I'm sure like
Right.
it can feel like a spot of like just feeling alone, and like you're on this island all by yourself, and you know, you don't
Right.
know how to navigate. And so I'm very glad and grateful for you to be able to create something for people, to use your things and turn it around for good, and to
Well, it
use your
is. That's the whole
testimony.
Me Too culture, is it not?
Hmm.
It's the Me
Hmm.
Too.
Hmm.
So it empowers both sides.
Yeah.
Yay.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Thank
love
you,
that. Yes.
Rachel.
Yes. Thank you. So if people want to get a hold of you, how can they get a hold of you? How can they connect with you?
Well, one, jot down my name. I have a group. It's Caring for Me Too. It's a caregiver support group online on Facebook. I have a website, caringforme2.com. I also have, you can catch me on Facebook or on Instagram. And I'd love to connect with you, because this is truly my passion. And I really believe what God has allowed, what's been in our life, but also it's his plan and purpose for what we have in the future as well. So that's ways that you can reach me.
Wow. Wow. Well, I again thank you so much for just taking time to pour into us and just create the awareness, share your story, where you've come from, and where you're at and where you're going. So
Well, Rachel, thank you so much for inviting me to
aw,
be on here.
yeah.
You're making a big difference, and
Mhm.
it's
Thank you.
awesome to see. So keep
Thank
doing
you.
what you're doing.
Oh, well, I appreciate that. I appreciate. So, well, until next week, my
Until
friends, we
next
will
time.
talk. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
This is your host, Rachel Bess, and I hope you loved the show. Go ahead and subscribe to my channel, as well as share with a friend. If you would like, you can follow me on Instagram as well as Facebook under Rachel Best. You can also